Welcome to Non-Partisan Hacks, the podcast where we talk about good government from the local level on up. I'm Joel Grans, a city councillor in Parksville, BC.
And I'm Sean Wood, also a Parksville councillor. We're here to unpack what's working and what's not in the world of local politics with a little help from some good people along the way.
Except this week, we don't have any good people. Just sorry, people.
Hey now, come on.
Yeah, so no guests, but we still have plenty of digging to do. Digging into, well, maybe we're digging too. Let's hope we're not digging. Including a new resolution Parksville's putting forward at the Union of BC Municipalities, and a spicy take on local governments are being asked to solve the housing crisis by taxing housing.
And spoiler alert, I'm not on Joel's deck this time. I'm in Ontario, which means we're testing out the long-distance councillor setup.
Quick plug, check out nonpartisanhacks.com for past episodes, show notes, and a way to drop us a line.
And just a reminder, the views expressed here are our own. They don't represent our councils or any official position. We're just here to talk things through and maybe stir the pot a little bit.
All right, let's get into it. And perfect timing, too, because the music just ended. It's as if we planned that. So, if listeners can't tell, you are not on our studio microphone setup, which is my studio's my backyard deck. You are somewhere else today in Ontario.
Yeah, we got off the plane late last night, maybe 1 o'clock. We were getting our rental car. You walk out of the airport here in Ontario, and it feels like you're in Florida, or the humidity is so high, such a difference from BC on the island anyways. That's the biggest difference that I've seen. There's so many lakes here and so much hydration that everything is just green and really humid. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at a very brown lawn right now, so I guess I'll be jealous of your green Ontario turf. But yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I'm used to getting off the plane here, coming from, I guess maybe it's when I've been in Arizona or something, which I haven't been there in forever, but my glasses fogging up when I get off the plane, and I feel like I'm a fish and breathing in water, but all right. Well, so today we're going to talk about a UBCM resolution. We've talked, I think, a little bit about what resolutions are, what UBCM is, but maybe, Sean, you want to do a quick kind of primer on what is UBCM and what resolutions at UBCM are?
Sure. So the Union of BC Municipalities, the name of the organization for people who are kind of not as politically nerdy as you and I.
It's not a university.
It's not a university. It's not even a union. Really, it's more of a federation of BC municipalities, where UBCM is the voice for all of those municipalities, ideally to the provincial government, because the setup is municipalities are children, is what the term is, of the parent of the province. And so we get together and we pass resolutions, and the idea is that you have resolutions discussed in a gigantic room with 2,000, say, people who go to these conventions every year. We talk about a resolution. There's a pro mic and a con mic. So people who are for this resolution, they line up at the pro mic and they say why this should go through. On the con mic, you have people lined up and they say why this shouldn't go through. It's an amazing process, very democratic. So many people, it's their favorite part of the convention. And then there's a vote. You hold up your cards, and either that resolution passes or does not pass. And then UBCM staff compile all of the resolutions that have passed after the convention, and then they all get sent to the province. And so if you're the province, you get to have this book of resolutions that have passed, that all your municipalities, your local governments are saying, hey, this is really what we'd like you to take a look at. This is what we need help on. And so
yeah, it's like a legislative wish list in a sense from local governments.
Right.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And the province does get back to UBCM. Sometimes it's the province says, hey, we're already been working on this. Look for this coming up. Or this is not something that we're looking into at this time. And at the very least, we do get feedback from the province, yay or nay, or this might be something possibly in the future.
Yeah, and quite honestly, like some of the responses are kind of a list of the things that the provincial government's already doing. So you send something to them and they'll send you back like, oh, we're doing this program and this act, and this is how we're tackling the thing that you're asking us to tackle. And these resolutions, they run the point of them is really local government representing their communities, going to the province saying, this is stuff that's not really our jurisdiction, but we'd like it if you could address this. And that, I guess, leads to the resolution that we passed recently in Parksville, that it's a motion to take this resolution to UBCM. It's been submitted now to UBCM. It will be looked at by a committee at UBCM and then brought to the resolutions sessions and discussed then. And I think we're looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. Basically, I mean, do you want to maybe sort of set up what this resolution does and what we're asking the province to do?
Sure. Just a little bit more on process before we get to that. I have been on the UBCM board. I did not serve on the resolutions committee, but when resolutions are submitted to UBCM, it goes to the resolutions committee, and Pete Fry and other people who are on that committee, they go through the resolutions and they make recommendations from those resolutions, whether they recommend a resolution for the board to support, or they do not recommend, or no recommendation. And then the board looks at that committee's recommendations for all of those resolutions, and then usually the board will just say, yes, we agree with the committee's recommendations on all of those, and then from there it will end up in the convention, the resolutions book for the convention.
Yeah, and so that's kind of like the next maybe test for this resolution. So the resolution was something that I brought to council as a motion, and then it got discussed and voted on at our council. And then from there, because it got approved and endorsed by our council, it got sent through to UBCM. So the next sort of stage for this is for it to get hopefully in the recommend pile. And then that'll be, or even, I guess in the recommend pile, it doesn't necessarily get debated at UBCM.
Correct.
So.
And so more kind of technical, kind of politically nerdy stuff. If this is in the recommended block, then there's say there's 100 resolutions in the recommended block. The 2,000 people in the room will just vote yay. We acknowledge that the committee and UBCM board are recommending these, and they all get passed if it's in the recommended block. This one, maybe it is in the no recommendation, and then it will be discussed on its own in the room. So we'll see what happens. If I had to guess, this would be in the recommended block, but we'll see. That's just me off the top of my head right now.
All right, we'll tune in a few months to see, see what happens there. Place your bets accordingly. Sean's put his down.
That's right. We've talked about the setup for it and the kind of the boring infrastructure that happens process in the background. But let's set you up, Joel, with the resolution itself. It's called Supporting Climate Resilience and Infrastructure Ready Housing Targets. And in plain language, we're asking the province to be smarter about how they set housing targets for municipalities.
Right now, the Housing Supply Act says that targets should be based on population growth and housing demand. And so if you don't know what housing targets are, you may have seen in the news discussion around naughty lists for certain communities where the province is basically trying to enforce these targets on certain communities. For example, View Royal in Vancouver Island has been in the news because of the targets that they have not been hitting their targets for new housing builds. What the resolution does is it asks the province to look at more than just predicted population growth, which is according to a formula that some people may also have some questions about the prediction of population growth, according to this formula used to do these housing targets. But what the resolution does is says, please, province, when you look at where to place the housing in our province, look at other factors too. Look at factors like whether there's enough water in that region. And maybe as a quick aside, Tofino has kind of set a limit on their housing recently. I think about a year ago, but they set a limit on the amount of housing based on their water availability. So that's just sort of one example of what you would want to look at for where you want to put housing in the province. But also you should look at other things like where is there infrastructure that could support the new development? Where are there healthcare services that can keep up with the population needs if there is going to be more population added there? And I think really one of the big ones here too is when we're looking at where we're placing housing, we also need to consider where in the province we're least susceptible to basically natural disasters like flooding, like even in Merritt in BC, where housing was built basically on a floodplain, and we've seen the 100-year, 200-year floods are actually happening more frequently than they had in the past. And if predictions are correct, there's going to be even more of that happening in the future. Why would we place housing in places that are more susceptible to these natural disasters? So that's where this resolution is saying, hey, province, we understand there's a need for housing, but let's look at the province more generally, say, where do we place our housing according to these other values that we have beyond just that the population might grow there?
Yeah. So, it's a virtuous thing to set these housing targets. The province is trying to lower the cost of housing. We know housing in BC, it's a very popular place. Housing costs are going through the roof for people, and people are having a hard time making ends meet. This is the idea behind the housing targets. We see often that policies are rolled out without getting into the details, the boring, nitty-gritty details of what are important to back up this policy. We've seen it on a variety of policies, but this one is, hey, so where do we have enough healthcare? Where do we have enough doctors? Where do we have enough tertiary care hospitals at NRGH, for instance? Where do we have enough drinking water? Where is this population going to fit best? And so this resolution, Joel, that you brought forward says, hey, we get the housing targets. We get you want more housing built. But let's also score locations for this housing with the infrastructure. Maybe it's a pollution control center, like our wastewater treatment center. Maybe we need to know the capacity of the current infrastructure in areas that can support the housing targets that we're pushing through. And we haven't seen these boring details that local governments deal with across the entire country and the province. We haven't seen these details be part of these housing targets. Instead, they're just saying, hey, you guys need to meet this vacancy rate for rentals, or you guys need to meet these targets. And we're not seeing these boring details that are important to support to support the housing. And so that's the beauty
and
of
absolutely,
this
because you look at housing is not a quick thing. It takes a long time to build. It takes a long time to take the process, and it's going to be there for a long time. And if there isn't going to the sort of the climate piece and the emergency sort of natural disaster aspect of the resolution, ultimately it's going to be the provincial government and the federal government that are going to have to bail out, possibly literally, certain parts of the province should there, say, be a flood. Right now, up until this legislation, you'd have a situation where depending on whether a council is sort of more pro or anti-development, would determine where more density occurs and which communities have sort of more density allowed in their OCP, which is a function of the local government and the electorate there. But it's not really anything to do with where in the province is actually ultimately better to put housing, just from a risk management perspective. I mean, you can get the numbers that this resolution asks for, the data for it. I mean, some people might critique and say, well, how do you know where this... You talk to the insurance industry and ask them, hey, where do you want to put insurance on housing? That's going to tell you right there where the better places are in the province for putting more density, and therefore putting fewer people at risk, putting less infrastructure at risk, putting less housing and all the costs associated with building housing. And I mean, this is for most of us, our houses are kind of the biggest asset, the thing that we put the most money into, and never mind all the emotional and all that relationship we have with our home. So when we're planning out the future, where we want to place our housing with these housing targets, don't just go based on this population dynamics formula, which, by the way, and this was discussed in the regional district meeting in that you were attending, Sean, recently, was that that formula doesn't really even fully take into consideration some of the more rural areas of the province, and just kind of assumes that the population growth in those areas is going to be the same as it would be in the municipalities in the sort of more currently highly populated areas. So that's why this resolution is saying, hey, let's step back from these housing targets and try to get extra value out of them, right? Let's just get some more value, squeeze some more benefit out of, if we're going to do these housing targets that are province-wide, then let's do what we do at the local government level and have a bit of an OCP for the province, an official community plan, and say, okay, we're going to have certain areas that are good for economic development. We're going to have certain areas that are going to be good for recreation. We're going to have tourism in certain areas. So let's focus on setting housing targets that address all these other values as well.
We've seen the costs of not planning for climate and infrastructure, wildlife recovery, water restrictions, overwhelmed health clinics. This resolution is about getting ahead of all of that.
Yeah, so UBCM's coming up in September. So I guess we'll be waiting on pins and needles to see whether this resolution gets which pile it ends up in, and if it does end up in a pile that will be discussed at the convention, I think it's gonna be quite exciting. I've already actually heard from a few people about this resolution when this kind of hit the proverbial, I guess, municipal news circuit, or whatever.
The fan? Did it hit the fan or the
fan,
news?
the grapevine? I went through the grapevine a little bit, and I have heard from folks that definitely are excited about this as being an approach that. So now I guess the question is too, and maybe this is the hot off the press piece, is that today we had a cabinet shuffle, and so how does I don't know, how do you see we've had the previous minister, Ravi Kahlon. We have dealt with him. I guess maybe as an aside, I did speak with Ravi Kahlon when he was in our community last summer, and I mentioned to him not this resolution because I hadn't really thought about this specific framing of the issue, but I told him, I said that we need to have if we're getting housing targets and if we're being asked to build more housing, we need the province to sort of back us up on that and provide the additional infrastructure that we need. And these housing targets sure come across as a bit of a stick. And it would really, really help local governments if you want us to approve more housing. It would really help us if you gave us a carrot as well that allowed us to even support that housing with the things that you need to make a community complete, such as funding for that infrastructure and doctors and all the other things that really are provincial responsibility that should come with the housing.
Yeah, and when we say naughty list, we don't mean really anything derogatory. It's more of a, Santa has a list where, the kid could be doing better throughout the year. Really, some local governments have felt like, oh, we made it on a list where we're kind of being told that we're not doing the job that we need to do, and that's kind of where that term comes from.
Is that how you frame it for your kids? Like,
no, not really.
Guys, you're on the naughty list, but it just means you've got these things to work on.
Yeah, there are opportunities for improvement. Santa's language has come a long way since the old days. Yeah. But I mean, I just want to make sure that the listeners understand that we don't mean it's anything derogatory to try to hit housing targets, because everyone is struggling with the cost of housing. And so that's just the way the province is saying, hey, you guys have housing targets. We need you to hit these, and that will help us hit our housing targets that we have as a province. That's all.
Absolutely. And we all have to work together on that for sure. But yeah, the naughty list and the housing targets and all that, the way that's come across in the media for sure is that communities don't want to end up on that list. And we did find out while we were at FCM, and I think we talked about this on our episode about FCM, we found out that we got those housing targets. We're next in line in Parksville to get those. So, so that was part of the reason this resolution also came forward, is it definitely got us thinking more about, well, what do these housing targets mean, and how can we get the best value out of that kind of concept?
Yeah, and I have heard that every local government in BC is eventually going to have housing targets. And so it's more of a rollout for the province as to what municipalities are getting their housing targets and when. But eventually, all local governments, all municipalities are going to have housing targets. And that way, the province sees themselves being able to manage themselves hitting their own housing targets by being able to look at a map and say, we've rolled out housing targets for everybody. And so we know what we can expect, hopefully, from all of those local governments. That's kind of the idea behind it, I think.
All right. Well, speaking of housing, let's speak of housing. We've got our quote take here, which is going to be touching on another aspect of this. So let's fire that up.
And I quote.
Quote take.
Our quote take for our show today is actually from a certain person named Sean Wood, Director Sean Wood.
Hey,
yeah, have you heard of this guy?
Yay.
We're doing like a meta quote take here. It's like quote take Inception. Which is a Sean reference to the Christopher Nolan movie, which is really good. So you'll be commenting on your own quote. You ready for that, Sean?
It's so exciting. I feel like I'm partisan here. I'm biased. But
Non-Partisan Hacks. Yeah, no,
right,
no, it's
non-partisan.
yeah. I think every podcaster has to be a little self-indulgent sometimes, right? Is that yeah? People don't do that, do they?
We put ourselves on microphones, so obviously we're a little bit biased.
Well, let's hear you on the microphone here. I'm going to cue this up.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. This is a gigantic topic. We are always talking about it, especially during provincial and federal elections. Having sat on the board of UBCM and sit on committees for FCM, the biggest ask that those presidents have and those bodies have is for municipal growth framework. We need financial tools to be able to do the things that we can do at this level. We are restricted to tax homes. So we're chasing affordability for housing while we tax the housing.
That was a certain Director Sean Wood at a regional district of Nanaimo meeting recently. Sean, give us some context on that.
Yeah, well, we were debating a housing affordability program through the regional district of Nanaimo. And I said, if local governments are trying to make housing more affordable, but the only tools that we have at the local government level are property taxes and development fees, then we're literally taxing the housing in order to make housing more affordable. And so this framing I think it easily communicates kind of the conundrum or the paradox that local governments are in, where we don't have any other financial tools except for taxing housing. Whereas if you're the province or the federal government, you can actually use legislation to give yourself more financial tools that are more progressive. Maybe you tax on incomes above $300,000, or you have a higher tax on alcohol. You can do all of these things at the provincial level of government, but at our level of government, we can only tax the housing that we're trying to make more affordable.
The argument, I hear it a lot, is that every level of government needs to get on this problem, right? To address this problem. I mean, whether it's the housing affordability crisis or climate, any number of issues that we face. And I fully agree with that. Every level of government should get on board for these problems, but we also need to understand how to do that within our own lane. So how do we collaborate appropriately to meet this society-wide objective? How do we do that in an appropriate way? And we've in Parksville we've done a bunch of stuff, which is we've donated land or given a $1 a year lease to a nonprofit organization to build housing. We've done several things like that, but end of the day, that just means that everybody else who's paying property taxes is going to be essentially footing the bill for that, because not only does the city now not get the revenue from that land, we also don't collect taxes, property taxes on that land either, which means that everyone else in the community is going to be paying incrementally more property taxes to pick up the slack. So that's the real challenge we have when it comes to playing that role. So what do you see, Sean? What is the appropriate role for local government in this affordability crisis that we see?
The appropriate role, Joel Grenz, I feel like, is what we're doing right now, where we have built a lot of housing in the city of Parksville. You and I didn't vote for every development, but we voted for a lot of the housing. But we are also paying attention to where those costs are going up on property taxes, which is a regressive tax, which means it's not necessarily based on someone's income. And when property taxes go up, that doesn't necessarily mean that those people have the money in the bank to pay for those property taxes. It just means that they have a home that's been going up in value and they see their property taxes go up. At the local government level, we are willing to raise the taxes. It used to be kind of 3%, 2.5%, 3.5%. We see that going up 5%, 5.5%, 6.5%. Some cities, municipalities
Vancouver
are
hit
8%,
9%, 9.9, I think it was.
15%. So we are willing to raise the taxes at the local government level to pay for the services that we provide. But are the provincial level of government and the federal level of government, are they willing to use their wide array of tax revenue collection tools to do the same? And we want them to do that, and they have the power to do that, and we need them to do that. Because we only have the one tool, and we make housing more expensive when we're trying to chase housing affordability.
Well, and there are also two sides to affordability. There's the side of costs, like what does it cost me to acquire something, and then there's the other side is how much money do I have to acquire things. So if we're looking at housing affordability, which is usually considered to be 30% of your income, so that your housing costs is no more than 30% of your income for it to be considered affordable. It does also matter what your income is, and so at the local level, we have also fewer tools on that side. The provincial government and federal government have way more tools to, like, I don't know about you, Sean, but I haven't done any delegations to Asia or something to drum up more business for Parksville in order to try to bring more revenue into Parksville or like bring higher paying jobs or that sort of thing. That does happen a little bit at the local government level for sure, but there's, again, not as many tools for finding ways to generate more economic activity and bring higher wages. Different things have been tried for sure on that, like paying a living wage in communities at the local government level, putting that in place. But so I'm not saying there's nothing you can do to also increase the amount of money people have available to pay for their housing, but there are way fewer tools, and we have to be careful at the local government level when we are where we fit ourselves into helping housing affordability.
Yeah. And to use a bit of a specific example for the city of Parksville, we are building a new wastewater treatment plant so that when people flush their toilets in a lot of the new housing density that we're building, that the toilets work and the wastewater goes somewhere and it's treated. So that budget initially for a new French Creek Pollution Control Center was $75 million. That $75 million had $8.5 million of it was a contribution from the provincial government. So, a little more than 10% was a contribution from the provincial government. And the rest is going to be taxed on the housing that we're trying to make more affordable for people. And the reason I like this example is because it's an exact example of the infrastructure that is needed to support the housing that the province is asking for. I would feel a whole lot better approving more housing if the province is like, you know what, don't worry about that $75 million for that wastewater treatment plant. And by the way, that cost is going to keep going up. It is not over at $75 million because infrastructure costs are very expensive these days. But we only saw a little more than 10% of that. And so that makes me more hesitant to approve more housing because I see that the more housing I approve, it is going to make that housing more expensive on the property tax side of things, especially for people who already own their homes or even are renting. It's going to trickle down to renters as well.
Yeah, because end of the day, when Sean says that property taxes are not progressive or they're regressive, it's because we're taxing wealth based on what BC assessment says the value of your home is right now, but you don't have that money in your pocket. It's not something you can just go to the bank and say, hey, I need to get some of the money out of my home that's worth whatever and use it to pay my property taxes. That's not a thing, obviously. Whereas if you're taxing things like revenue from corporations or profit from corporations or your income tax, those things can be tiered based on the amount of money you have, so that you're not kind of taking away as much from lower income people as you would from people that have a higher income. So that's where we've got to be really careful and keep that in our heads when we're deciding on what new services to take on at local government and what new expenses and costs that we are going to pass on in the form of tax increases that end up on your property tax bill.
Yeah, and I as we wrap up, Joel, I wanted to mention that although I might be sounding like I'm coming down hard on housing targets or we need more money for infrastructure, that has nothing to do with the smart, compassionate, good people in the province. A lot of times we see people elected to the provincial government who don't have local government experience, and that doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them stupid people. But all I can do at my elected level is be a voice and try to shine some light on some details that we deal with down at this level, in hopes that our little podcast or chatting with a minister or chatting with the premier or our MLA, that some of those messages work their way up. And then all of a sudden it could be like, and we saw it for the short-term rental, where they're chatting with our planner and they're like, oh, right, those details, that's important. Let's change it. And so I think we've seen willingness to change, and all you and I are doing is being a little bit more of a voice and checking a mark beside our advocacy in our strategic plan by kind of framing this in a way that everyone can understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's critical as the conversations, and that's, like you said, that's the podcast, that's the efforts we try to do with FCM, UBCM, going to meet with our elected official counterparts in the provincial and federal government, because those conversations really, you don't know what you don't know. And we definitely have a different perspective having been at the local government table. I don't know what it's like in the cabinet room. I don't know what it's like in the caucus. I haven't been there before. Hopefully we'll have some of those people on the podcast so we can bend their ear about it. But until then, we'll just have to keep doing what we're doing here. And I think, learning from having these conversations and working together as best we can across these different levels of government. So.
And Premier David Eby, I know you keep emailing me. We will have you on the show. We're just kind of working through a couple of scheduled episodes that we're getting to, but we will have you on the show. I
mean, it's really our executive producer has a very, very specific sequence of guests and timelines and targets and everything. So, I mean, even this executive producer even whipped Sean to come on the show when he's in Ontario on his vacation with his family. So thanks for doing that. I really appreciate that. The listener is happy about that. So that's a wrap on episode 5 of Non-Partisan Hacks. I do want to thank you for joining us for this no guest episode. We're just two counselors trying to make sense of local government, one resolution at a time.
And hey, you can now watch back episodes on YouTube. Just search Non-Partisan Hacks or head to our website at nonpartisanhacks.com.
YouTube? Does that mean that we're in video now?
I believe that's a no.
Oh yeah, we're not video. No, there's no video.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do video. Drop us a line at nonpartisanhacks.com if you think it would be good to see us on video, and we'll see if we can make that happen. But yeah, and speaking of which, if you've got a good government story, a topic idea, or want to be a guest, hey, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, take care of yourself and your community. Thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it.